Hi, am I audible? All right, thanks so much. Thank you for having me. So I think when I was debating what I could talk to an audience, the last thing I want to do is preach to the converted, right? So saying, what is it that I can talk about analytics? I think there were two things that as practitioners are very, very passionate about. One is how do we derive value out of analytics, which is essentially how do we make it land in our P&L and balance sheet, drive the top line, bottom line, customer engagement, et cetera, whatever we want to do, right? How do we get to that? And while thinking about it, and I think there are a number of sessions also on adoption and democratization, et cetera, so I said, let me also talk about another thesis that we have actually tried to pivot to, and a lot of our clients are doing as well, right? And therefore, it's it's my rather submission that perhaps it's a way to realize value that perhaps we may not have paid as much attention as perhaps it deserves. Right? So the word agile, of course, is after analytics is the next most misused word perhaps. So and combined with AI. So please, we'll discuss the sort of the core of it in a minute, right? So I think the core idea. Okay, so let me just try this. Okay, so the core idea that we come to is we like to say that change is the only constant, and all such nice sounding things. But I think what trips us up is the pace of change, right? That's the variable, which is not constant. Traditionally, we would take 6 months to evolve an AI solution, and I hope all of us passionately believe that we can make that impact. Let's say growth is stalling, we need to change the growth trajectory. The person who's driving that business may not even have 6 months in his job if that impact doesn't come through anymore, right? So the rapidity of the world changing so quickly necessitates in our sort of thinking, how do we go from a traditional way of going, understanding the problem, diagnosing the problem, which we can't short circuit too much, but then, getting the right data, I think, which the panel spoke very, very, elucidated very well, and then looking at how do we sort of make the rubber hit the road, right? So obviously, that part is another challenge which needs to be addressed in terms of some business guy is sort of, or person is betting their bonus on saying on the outputs of our AI model as AI practitioners, right? So how do we make sure that they feel rewarded enough to take the risks that we are taking, or betting on us, right? So I think, so essentially our belief is we think beyond the model, we make the rubber hit the road. How do we get there? The idea is, and I am carefully not using the word products because they tend to have another set of connotations, because products tend to have, every organization is different, there are different challenges, and therefore what we are sort of coming around to the point of view, and many of our clients is to say we have pre-built solutions which are modular and componentized, and some of these components can be used in solutions or in problems that we are trying to solve, right? So the new way or the more efficient way we think, which can sort of cut our time to market by say 60%, and therefore make the difference between an effective and an ineffective initiative is, and let me take an example or two, right? So for example, forecasting, and I think planning season is in the air, right, anyway. So when we work on forecasting, and we'll cover some of these aspects, there are certain key challenges in let's say, forecasting at the right level of granularity, having the right hypotheses, having the right data, algorithm, and then output, right? So algorithm is not that big of a challenge, there's enough sort of sources of algorithms that we can actually apply. Now, where we can crunch time is instead of looking at creating hypotheses with the needle in the haystack, do we have pre-built, as we call it, exploratory data analysis to actually come with those hypotheses faster? Can we use pre-built components to actually get to the point where we have outputs from the model faster? Then obviously, the rubber hitting the road is not going to take that much time, but if it's a pre-built solution, you also have the ability to expect some of the pitfalls. I think that was also a point that was made in the panel, and therefore come better prepared to answer those questions or convince stakeholders, right? And obviously, last but not least, I think there was the AI ops, right? So eventually, and please consider ML ops and AI ops as interchangeable for all practical purposes, is how do we institutionalize and industrialize it, right? So one of the criticisms of AI initiatives is that they become POCs and they stay POCs, right? And it becomes very hard to industrialize and embed within our systems. And there is a framework to ensure that, can we follow the rigor of an IT software development type process in terms of, let's say, versioning the code and et cetera, creating, automating, spinning up environments, getting outputs, flowing it, it flowing down into downstream systems to make the moments of truth, et cetera, but have the ability to use, to have the intelligence that AI will bring to this, right? So let me just give a few examples of the kind of solutions that we have found that we and our clients are, finding value in, right? So just moving on, excuse me. So let's say these are some standard problems that we all try to solve, right? So, and our thesis is that each one of them has one critical problem that we need to sort of surmount, right? So let's say, for argument's sake, there is what we call customer value management, right? Which is the whole personalization. How do we extract more value from a customer base, which, by helping them ladder up a better set of products, solutions that they can use from us, right? Whether it's B2B or B2C. B2C, let's say. Now, the problem is we are all very clear what we need to do. We need to have a customer 360, everything we know about the customer. Then we have as small and refined a segmentation as we can. We have some propensity, who's at risk to, let's say attrite, who's at risk to buy something, or who's got maximum propensity to buy something. Then we have an engine which recommends what we should be proposing to them. And then we have a communication of how they will receive it best, right? Now the challenge is, if we go on this journey, it takes so long, and we'll cover this, as an example, if time permits. It takes so long that it may not be relevant anymore by the time we get to the end of the journey, by the time those campaigns go live, where we are trying to create the moments of truth, either in the products and offers we give, or in the experiences we give to our customers, right? Similarly, let's say, if I look at commodity price forecasting, which we do for manufacturing companies, given inflation being what it is and as unpredictable, right? So there's a set of data which is like, for example, trading data, which is what in exchanges, how some of these commodities are traded. If it's agricultural commodities, what's the rainfall, sunlight, weather conditions in key growing countries, the key consuming countries, GDP data, trade, international trade, how it's going, right? So import, exports, etc. So there are, and some news as well, right? So given what, let's say, OPEC Plus does or somebody else does, there are impacts on a large set of commodities, right? So the ability to get all of this, to keep our hypothesis ready, to be able to get all of this data together, to be able to sort of apply relevant sets of algorithms, and to able to explain that to a procurement buyer who, for instance, he has a question, what do I buy, when do I buy, and how much do I buy, right? So those are simple questions that they have. How do we answer them in an accelerated time frame, right? So these are the kind of benefits that these pre-built solutions and their components build. The whole idea is, instead of a 6-month or a 8-month cycle, how do we get to a cycle which is, let's say 6 weeks to 8 weeks at best, right? So so maybe I'll just, I'll go through 1 or 2 examples, and then we'll probably, look at, if there are any quick questions or so. I think about 10 minutes, so I'll just take 2 quick stories. Yeah. So this is the, the life cycle of a customer. We acquire a customer, then we call what's a babysitting phase, first experience of the brand. Then there's the core customer base, and then there are alumni who are likely to sort of move on and explore other brands, etc. Right? So, and it's broadly across products and services that we see in business to consumer situations. This was something that we did using pre-built components for a telecom operator. The reason we've done across industries, the reason we chose this was it had 200 million customers, which is, pretty much answers any scale that we might want to do, right? So essentially, there is a starting point of a set of hypotheses. Again, this may not solve 100% of the problem that we want to solve for a specific situation, right? It may be an 80% solution, but our thesis is that solving that and getting it out into the market, hearing the feedback from the market, trying to figure out if we are able to get adoption buy-in from the businesses to actually use them is well worth our time. It's time well spent, because that sort of determines, rather than, the feedback from the market is much better and our business is much better than, sort of our whiteboards, right? So I think that's the fundamental thesis on which we run this, right? So our, instead of sort of a typical 5 to 6 month time frame where we, get action across in the form of, eventually this is a campaign that goes out to a few million customers, right? The time can be crunched to 6 weeks because there is a base sort of model of what we want to know. There is a playbook of, instead of looking for what data do we have about the customer, we are trying to look with a playbook saying, these are the 200 data points we want. What do we have, right, out of it? Maybe we don't have all 200, we have only 50 or 80 or whatever it is. Then the idea becomes, how do we sort of create proxies? How do we smartly look at, some of the trends that we're seeing rather than the absolute values of what we see? Therefore, we get that insight, which we may be able to, sort of derive some of these, behavioral patterns. From there, how do we sort of segment? How do we create benchmarks? We also have done this for B2B separately, because that's another sort of difficult segment where how do you discount to a customer versus another one? How do you create these cohorts where you can actually compare is challenging, right? So, I mean, segmentation. Then you look at, sort of how do you price, right? So do you custom price? And I think there is merit to look at, obviously, how explainable it is and how one-to-one your channels are. Therefore, it shouldn't cause a PR issue that you offer a different price to two different customers. But it is in the realm of possibility given, we look at all of the other things being equal. And then a recommendation engine, right? So, I mean, I was reading somewhere about Netflix. They have some 87,000 segments, and everybody gets fairly customized recommendations on what to view next, right? So, there are various algorithms which can, some of these are pre-built and they can, sort of sit on the data that we've created using these pre-built models and then run, right? So that's the whole concept of what we do. And, the business results therefore are quick, and the business is also interested and keyed in because they're not looking at, sort of, as some famous economist said, in the long term, we're all dead, right? So how do we get it and when do we get these results and outcomes of our initiatives, right? Demand forecasting, another very different sort of example for all product companies and also a lot of services companies, right? So for example, how do you staff, whether it's IT, whether it's customer service, whether it is, front-end, large network of, let's say industries like banking, etc., financial services. So there's multiple applications of these, right? Some of the significant challenges in this is there is variable product hierarchy, there is variable geography hierarchy, and none of them match, right? And it could be actually different if you look at a large company which is in, let's say, multiple states or even multiple countries. Some of these hierarchies may also not be the same. Companies may not be organized in the same way. So if we solve this one problem, and that's sort of central to our sort of ideas, right? So there are enough forecasting algorithms around, right? So that's not a problem to be solved. If we can solve this variable hierarchy problem, then we can sort of leverage that and quickly deliver results rather than wait for the whole cycle to complete, right? So we know what we're looking for. We go and look for the best case out of that. We use what we have. We deliver outcomes and start to see value and adoption. And then we use the feedback loop to make it stronger and deliver, right? So that's essentially what we do. In this specific case, I mean, inventory pile up and that was already causing scrappage and obsolescence of certain products. So in multiple industries. So therefore, how do you actually quickly make a business impact, which also grabs the interests of business, right? So they're living with a problem where they're losing money, making money, having challenges to make money, etc. So I think that's what it is. For each one of them, we have multiple so we are pivoting, and not just us. Many of our clients are actually asking us, for example, a very large global FMCG giant is asking us to create a productized sort of a pre-built solution for forecasting for them, which they want to use and internalize as a forecasting COE, right? So it's not just, we obviously have value as consultants, we can, sort of bring that, into the picture, but industries themselves are looking at, for their largest use cases, their biggest value, how they can create productized solutions so that they can drive value to market much faster, right? So I'll just take a pause. There are about 3 minutes. If there are a question or two, I'm happy to sort of take that. Yeah. There's a question, please.
Turn this on. Yeah. Hi, Prashant. Great session. Hi. And this is a topic very close to my heart. I call it time to scale, right? Which is a lot of POCs happening, but not enough things going to scale. So one of the things that, and I'm Chiranjoy from Deloitte. I look after data science and analytics in the organization. So the question that I have is, a lot of times, so you highlighted correctly that accelerators and platforms are what products used to be for software in terms of data science, because it still requires a lot of sort of customization. But in order to short circuit this and accelerate this process, a lot of time the bottlenecks actually doesn't come from the consulting side, but comes from the organization itself. And, and especially in two places. One is the data quality, which is the totally top of the funnel where you start. And second is adoption, right? So what would be your advice to organizations like us to accelerate those processes?
So, okay, so in full disclosure, right? So I think this meter starts after you get the data, and the pilot measuring and sign off, the time is the same in both. So it doesn't need to be. There is an acceleration, but we don't. So I think two things, right? So one, for instance, I mean, we personally felt this data quality, data profile also, when you look at multiple sort of, there's no single source of truth, there's not even a single version of the truth, right? Often. So we have pre-built components to do that as well, right? And then, for example, there's a FMCG company which looks at Nielsen data. Now, Nielsen data comes in its own way, its own hierarchies, which doesn't conform to, let's say, the personal care, hygiene, blah, blah, whatever, the categories and hierarchy that this company has. So we are trying to say, can we use some algorithms to actually map and get, because if that fails, that ingestion fails, everything else fails, and all the intelligence that every, sort of individual in the chain receives, right? So, and that's actually an AI ML model, which is trying to say, okay, how do we sort of make sure that it doesn't fail? It may not be 100%, it may be 98%, 90, whatever, X%, right? So, but how do we let it fail? So, on the data, again, I mean, so the hard part about data is that the ownership of having good data has to, in the end, lie with the business, right? So if vendor data has got to be good, the vendor management knows that data, right? But that's a very hard road to walk, right? So the next best thing is to look at how do we intelligently cleanse, how do we intelligently ensure quality, how do we intelligently govern. For example, maybe going a little off topic, we built a similar thing called CogniSteward, which is a cognitive data steward. So instead of stewardship being, danda maroing to like bunch of people saying, bhai karo karo, and then, begging them to do it, maybe technology can do that job for us, right? So no easy shortcuts, but we can smartly use technology. On adoption, I think, like for example, if we go to, I know we just on time, but maybe I'll just complete this one. So if I go to a procurement buyer who's been buying, let's say, some resin for 25 years, and I tell him, look, the model is telling that you shouldn't buy now, you should buy later, run down your inventory, change your sources that you strategically source from, etc. Guy is going to say, look, I know my business, right? So how do we convince them? The good part about us is because if you have a pre-built solution, not just about us, anybody, if you have done that, you have a playbook as well. It's not just about a solution. So if this occurs, what do you do? What are the 10 likely questions? How do you already go with pre-built answers as well? So the chances are higher. It could still, sort of be and in all circumstances and all cases, I think one of the big fears is, will AI replace my job? Am I going to be reduced to a bot, right? So I think that's where we also try and manage the politics of it to ensure that we look at it as a decision support, right? Nobody can look at 100 variables and try and make out what's going on where, right? So here's someone who can, or something which can help you do your job better and benchmark your performance as well. So like a procurement guy has to sort of, let's say, manage material inflation well in, let's say, in products. So how do we help get that? So, we aid the bonus rather than, challenge it.